Hello everyone, Scientia here, and welcome to the Necromancer part of my Guild Wars 1 skill review project. And in this episode, I'm going to go ahead and go over some of the mechanics of the Necromancer. So there's a couple of things that are important to understand. So the Necromancer itself, as a profession, tends to focus more on what I would consider pressure. So in the game, in general, in the conceptual space of the game, you have these two big concepts of pressure versus spike. Spike is trying to concentrate damage at a single target very quickly to wear that target down before any healing can keep it alive. So it's going to be concentrating damage. Pressure is about wearing down resources over time. And so it just slowly whittles things away. Necromancers have been used for spike strategies, specifically because of lifesteal, which is one of the mechanics we're going to talk about. Lifesteal originally went through every form of protection. There was a change, late in the game's life, where protection stuff, things that would reduce damage, would now apply to lifesteal. I don't like the change from a philosophical standpoint, but I understand why it was done from a balance standpoint. But anyway, Necromancer as a profession has just a lot of stuff to slowly whittle things away. So there's blood magic, which generally focuses on lifesteal type stuff, and though there's some party support things in there. Curses has a lot of the pressure, punisher type mechanics. There's a lot of similarities between Necromancer and Mesmer, but they're in terms of focusing on hexes and wearing opponents' resources down and punching them. But Necromancers focus on things from a bit of a different angle. So Mesmers have a lot of interrupts, and they tend to be about punishing actions or trying to stop actions, whereas Necromancers have punishing actions and then just making all of your life drain away and things like that. So there's also much more of a condition focus in Necromancer, debilitating conditions and things like that. Disease is notably something Necromancers are good at. Rotting flesh is a prime example of that, with being able to give quite a lengthy form of it. And then there's death magic, which the specialty of death magic is there's some amount of direct damage stuff, but it's primarily about minions. So minions are a specific Necromancer-only mechanic. The number of minions, if you see here with death magic, is capped by the amount of death magic I have. So you get 2 minions plus another minion for every 2 ranks of death magic. So at 16 death magic, you can have 10 minions max. Originally, that cap was not there, and I actually have an old screenshot that I might be able to dig up for this video, where I had far more than 10 minions. But that was extremely powerful, and various things in the game were changed. I'll talk about it when I talk about death magic specifically. But that made it, aside from the cap, it made it harder to maintain minions in the original way and all that sort of thing. So that cap was added midway through the game. I don't remember. It was relatively early. And then there's Soul Reaping. Soul Reaping is the primary attribute, and it's extremely powerful. So for each point of Soul Reaping, you gain 1 energy whenever a non-spirit creature near you dies. You may only gain this energy 3 times every 15 seconds. So I'm not quite sure how they calculate that, but it slows it down. That's not going to be too big of a limit, just because, frankly, things don't die that often. But if you have a ton of things dying simultaneously for some reason, you are not going to get a ton of energy, right? You're just going to get a lot of energy. Soul Reaping is extremely powerful for returning energy, although it obviously becomes very unimpressive in certain circumstances. So Soul Reaping becomes very uninteresting if things stall out where there's nothing dying. And it's also dubious if you're going up against, say, a boss where it's just you and them. So the best example of this is Shiro at the end of Factions. Spoilers, I guess. Although it's broadcast very early in the game. But in that boss fight, it's just you and Shiro if you're going in with heroes. So Soul Reaping never has a chance to trigger unless your party's dying and you don't want that. So, but for the most part, Soul Reaping is extremely powerful, and it's some of the strongest energy management in the game. It's built into the primary attribute, and it gives you a ton of energy. So that's kind of like a general overview of like what the Necromancer does in terms of how it plays. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff here to try to tear down what the opponent's doing. There's a lot of anti-enchantment stuff, even more so than Mesmer. There's a bunch of things to cause health degeneration. And Necromancer has a lot of armor-ignoring damage. Shadow damage, which, for example, Shadow Strike here deals shadow damage. That is armor-ignoring, and Lifesteal is armor-ignoring. And dark damage, if there's anything that does that, also is, I believe... Actually, that might be... If they just lose life, they also just lose life. Dark damage might be something... Yeah, like weapons deal that, and that does care about armor. But a lot of the stuff here is going to be shadow damage, which is armor-ignoring, or just, like, straight damage, or, like, loses blank health. Losing blank health is... It's armor-ignoring. Necromancer does deal cold damage as well. So, for example, this Hex spell deals cold damage when you apply it. So you see some amount of that. So Necromancer usually deals armor-ignoring damage, although some of its stuff does care about armor. So there's a couple of other mechanics here that I want to demonstrate. So one of them is, we saw a little bit of this with Mesmer, but hexes that have a benefit for you. So, for example, if I apply this Life Siphon, you'll notice that I now have 3 pips of health regeneration. And if I apply it to another target, I now have 6, right? So there's a few hexes like this that call back to you. Then there is Life Sacrifice. So if you see here on Dark Pact, there's that 10% next to that red bubble, which is on the far left. That 10% indicates that I will sacrifice 10% of my maximum HP to use this. So if I do that, you notice I took 45 damage. My HP went down. Now, that's a part of Necromancer. There's a Ritualist has a few life sacrifice skills, but it's primarily a Necromancer mechanic. Usually your spells are significantly cheaper when that happens. So, for example, this is 1 energy, or this is also 1 energy for a kind of an area of effect lifesteal damage spell. This deals, right now 54 damage, right, in a pretty big area of effect, and it does none of it cares about armor. This one specifically, because I'm gaining a bunch of healing, it will offset that life loss. Then there is straight up life steal, which you saw some here. Vampiric Gaze is a good example of that. It steals health. When you steal health from something, you get that amount of health back. However, if you notice here, one of those was a 1. That's because the life steal... Actually, I'm going to go ahead and use this now. This is a minion spell. It animates. So Necromancers care about corpses, and they can do things with corpses. I'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to take advantage because this thing will stand back up. So you cannot steal more life than something has, is basically what I was going for there. So that is another thing about life steal. So, yeah... Necromancers have several classes of spells that care about corpses. There are some spells that just care about them. So, for example, Consume Corpse just cares about a corpse. It just exploits a corpse. So, a corpse can only be used for one thing, and that's called exploiting it. Let's go ahead and get this going down. This is a very powerful skill that I'll talk about later. So, if I use Consume Corpse, I teleport to that corpse and exploit it. So, when it's exploited... Right, I can no longer raise minions from it. I can't use Consume Corpse because it is used up. So corpses are an important resource for Necromancers, or they can be if you build around them being an important resource. You'll also notice that when my minions died there, I just gained 11 energy from each one. So Soul Reaping is being very powerful there. And then, like I said, there's minions. They exploit a corpse to animate 2 level 11 minions. So minions are a Necromancer mechanic in Death Magic, predominantly. I think there might be a skill that might make a minion in another attribute line, but I'm not positive on that. No. Death Magic is the home of minions. So I can just keep making more minions, and I can get a whole whole small army of them. Another type of skill that I want to highlight is the well. So wells exploit a corpse and create some sort of area of effect. Sometimes they harm enemies, other times they are beneficial to you. So for example, this Well of Blood, I use it, and now for 18 seconds, my allies in this area have +5 health regen. If I hit this panel, you can see that my minions are regenerating health because they are under the effect of Well of Blood, which is regenerating their HP. Minions, over time, get more and more health degeneration, so even if I get a well back up, which I should be able to, yeah, I can, well, I just hit the minion button, not the well button. But even if I get another well going here, these guys are now at parity. They're not losing health, but they're not gaining health. So they have 5 health degeneration. Over time, minions just gain more and more health degeneration, so they will die, just naturally. And that is just a property of minions. So I think that covers most of the mechanics. We talked about minions, wells, hexes that return stuff, life sacrifice, life steal, exploiting corpses, kind of what the attribute lines are about. So I think we've covered most of the basics of Necromancer. There are some... Actually, I should go ahead and talk about this. There are some specific insignia that Necromancer have. I should generally have been talking about insignia more often in general. But we can go speak to the rune trader and take a quick look at those. Insignia are things that you put in your armor. So there's no special runes. It's just the standard runes of minor, major, and superior for each attribute line. I'm surprised blood magic is that high. Death magic normally would be super high because everybody wants death magic for making minion masters. Because minion master is just a term used to refer to a build that has a bunch of minions on it, and it's very, very strong in many areas of the game. It should be added, by the way, that only fleshy things leave exploitable corpses. So if things don't leave a corpse, obviously you can't use it. And if something leaves a corpse but it's non-fleshy, I don't know if non-fleshy things actually leave corpses. Now that I think about it, it might just disintegrate. I would have to, like, I've not actually really thought about that, but I just know that if it can't bleed, you can't raise it. You can't exploit it. Like if it's immune to bleed, poison, and disease, it's non-fleshy, it doesn't leave a corpse that you can exploit. So there are definitely areas where Minion Master is a terrible build and just doesn't do anything. You need corpses. Like I would not take a Minion Master in against Shido, for example, because there's probably not going to be corpses there unless you're losing, in which case that's a terrible plan. So so Necromancer Insignia there's some standard stuff. Undertaker's Insignia, for example, increases your armor the lower your HP gets. This is not an insignia I ever use. Those numbers would have to be significantly higher for me to consider using it because I don't want to be at low health, right? So what this would theoretically do is as your HP gets lower, you get tankier and tankier. I would consider using this if those numbers were like 10 to where I'd get like halved damage at, or even like 15 or something. Like this would have to be pretty high for me to use it. But I just wanted to bring up like there's that. And then there's like, while you're hexed, like I don't want this. So one of the problems that Necromancer has some of these weird ones that I just have no use for. But there's Minion Masters, which is going to be kind of popular. It gives you additional armor when you're controlling minions. Bone Lace, for some random reason, there's piercing armor. The ones that are most interesting are Torment. Tormentor's Insignia just straight up gives you plus 10 armor. No conditions, like it's unconditional, but you take additional damage from holy sources. So you can see like if it's on your chest piece, it increases the holy damage you take by 6. On legs, it's by 4, and on other armor by 2. This is actually not a huge downside. There are very limited sources of holy damage in the game. So in general, you can make Necromancers a little bit tankier. It's not a lot tankier, but it's a little bit tankier. And then Bloodstained is another very important insignia. It reduces the casting time of spells that exploit corpses by 25%. You only need one of these because it's non-stacking. So, for example, it was originally in boots, these Tyrian boots. They were like Bloodstained boots before they introduced the insignia system, which is why that's the skin that I have on him. But is that the... No, those are Shinigami boots. But the Bloodstained insignia is very, very useful because it allows your minion spells that tend to have slightly longer casting times to be able to get off a little bit more quickly, things like that. So it's a popular one to have at least on like some piece of armor, such as the boots. I could see putting it on like a death magic rune headpiece as well, just because that's the time that you're generally going to need it the most. But it's useful for like wells and the other attribute lines. So want to touch on that. Also, I guess I should mention like necromancers use standard caster stuff, focuses, scepters, staves. And they have the +1 energy regeneration on their pants and boots, and the +5 energy on their chest piece and gloves. So that's basically an overview of the Necromancer, I guess. So next time we're going to go ahead and start getting into attributes. Specifically, a blood magic, I believe, is the first one up. Yeah, right here. So we will start with that. But until then, everyone, take care and goodbye.